Hello everyone, I welcome you all to my channel Revealing Concepts. In today's video, we would be learning about the heat budget of the Earth under the chapter Atmosphere. Now, why is the name heat budget? Because here we are going to see exactly how Earth is able to manage the heat that it gets from the sun. And we have already learned that the heat or the radiations that the sun sends to the earth are called as the solar radiations, or they are also called as the solar insulations. So how earth is going to make use of these radiations, and then how it is again going to give it back into the atmosphere. So this balance of using these radiations and again giving them back into the atmosphere, how this entire calculation has been done by our earth is nothing but the heat budget of the earth. So the entire management of the heat is something that we would be learning in today's video. So now we have the sun, which radiates out the solar insulations on the earth. Now these particular insulations, when they reach to the earth's surface, the earth makes use of this and then it also releases it back into the atmosphere. So it's like whatever amount the earth is getting from the sun of the heat, the entire amount is again released back into the atmosphere, so that the balance has been maintained and the budget has been settled properly. So here, when the sun releases its solar insulation and these insulations, they reach the earth releases the entire amount back into the atmosphere. But now here, this released amount of heat which is there, and this released amount of heat by the earth is divided into different types. There are different ways, there are different processes through which these solar insulations that have been received by the earth are released back into the atmosphere. Now, just like the sun's radiations are called as the solar insulation, the heat that has been released back into the atmosphere by the earth, or the heat that has been released by our earth, is called as the terrestrial radiations. So these released amount in formal terms is called as terrestrial radiations. Now, why the name terrestrial? Because here the heat is now been released by earth, and hence the name terrestrial radiations. Now these released amount by the earth, that is the terrestrial radiations that have been released by the earth, are categorized or divided into two types, or they are of two types. First is some part of this 100% of the heat that's been received by the earth is immediately released into the atmosphere, and some part is in the form of delayed release. Now, what do you mean by delayed release? It means that earth has to use this heat that it gets from the sun to do certain kinds of processes, and once all those processes are done, it releases back into the atmosphere. So the entire radiation that the sun gives, we will consider it as 100% of the radiation. उसमें से कुछ is been released immediately as soon as they reach the earth's surface, and some is been released in delayed form. Now we are going to see कि कितना immediately release होता है और कितना delayed form में release होता है. So the first type is the immediate release. So out of this 100% of the heat that we get, the immediate release is total of 35%. So out of the 100% heat or solar insulations that the sun receives, the immediate release is of 35%. अब ये 35% आया कहाँ से, या क्या क्या है इस 35% में? So the first is that 27% is reflected back by the clouds. As you remember in the previous video, I did mention that clouds are opaque to the incoming solar radiations. That is why on a cloudy day, you won't find sun rays that visible or bright and shine. Similarly, here we can say that the clouds that are there all over the earth, they also radiate back the sun's radiation, the solar insulation, immediately just when they reach the earth. And out of this 100%, it is 27% of the solar radiations that are immediately released by the clouds. The next 2% is released by the ice caps. Now we all know what is ice cap. Ice cap is basically the ice covered areas. Now since these areas are white in color, and that is why we can say that their reflectivity is high. So this term, the reflectivity of any particular object to reflect back the light that it gets is nothing but albedo. And here we can say कि ice caps has got the maximum albedo, whereas in forest areas the albedo is the lowest because वहाँ पे बहुत darkness रहता है. I mean darkness is something that absorbs the light as compared to that of the white surface. So here 2% has been reflected back by the ice caps. Then there is 6% which is reflected back by the particulate matter. Again, if you remember the previous video, and if you haven't watched that video, please do visit my channel and see video number 1 and 2. It talks about certain basic concepts which I am going to use directly over here now. So here particulate matter is nothing but the dust particles that are present in the atmosphere, which leads to reflection of light, it leads to scattering of light. So कुछ हिस्सा, and how much is that कुछ हिस्सा? 6% of the total solar insolation is been reflected by the particulate matter in the atmosphere. So these 27% plus 6% plus 2% together makes 35%, which is immediately released back into the atmosphere by the earth. And that is how we understand कि out of the total 100%, अभी के लिए 35% जो है वो immediately release हो जाता है back into the atmosphere, back into the space. Now, if 35 has been released immediately out of this 100%, so ये जो remaining amount है, जो अभी तक release हुआ नहीं है, but it would be released sooner or later, वो कितना है? That is almost 65%. Okay. Now we are going to see what happens of this 65%. ये जो 65% है, this has been released in the form of delayed. It is basically released in delayed form. So ये क्या होता है? Immediately release नहीं होता. Now let's see how this 65% goes back into the atmosphere, and hence there is maintenance of this heat budget of the earth. So ये जो 65 है, उसको भी अभी we are going to divide into two types. The first type is one which is absorbed by the earth, and the other one is which is absorbed by the atmosphere. See, our main aim is कि whatever heat, whatever solar insolation the earth gets, it should go back into the atmosphere जितना उसको मिला है. So now out of this 65%, 51% is absorbed by the earth and 14% is absorbed by the atmosphere. So we are done with this 14%. It is already going into the atmosphere. ये 35% एटमॉस्फेयर में गया, ये 14% एटमॉस्फेयर में गया. Now let's see what happens with this 51% which has been absorbed by the earth. It has still not gone into the atmosphere. So ये जो 51% है which has been absorbed by the earth, इसमें से 23% जो होता है that is in the form of Earth's radiation. That is something which has been given out by the Earth into its heat that it releases. Earth also releases its heat from its surface, and we have seen just now it is called as the terrestrial radiation. So ये जो Earth के radiations होते हैं जिनको हम terrestrial radiations बोलते हैं, when the sun rays or the solar insolation hits the Earth's surface, 23% out of this 15% which has been absorbed by the Earth is been released in the form of terrestrial radiations or the Earth's radiation. Now what happens is ये जो 23% है, so let's say कि if this is our earth and this is the sun, and if these are the solar insolations that are successfully able to reach the earth's surface, so इसमें से now we have seen कि 23% is totally absorbed by the earth's surface. Out of this 23%, there is almost 17% which is it goes into the space because of the scattering of light, and when it is reflected back, like this 23% is again given back by the earth, right, in the form of terrestrial radiation. Abhi this 23% which is given by the earth in the form of terrestrial radiations, isme se bhi 17% is again going back into the space, into the atmosphere because of scattering. Scattering क्यों होता है? Because there are particulate matters that are present in the air. So ये 17% goes back into the space. So this is done now. because it is now gone into the atmosphere. This 35% is gone into the atmosphere. This 14% is gone into the atmosphere. Now what about the next 6%? 23 में से 17 गया तो 6 बचा. अभी ये 6 जो और अर्थ ने दिया है अपनी तरफ से, उसका क्या होगा? So this 6% is again absorbed by the greenhouse gases. Now which are these greenhouse gases? We have carbon dioxide, we have ozone, we have other greenhouse gases like oxides of nitrogen, oxides of sulfur. These are the greenhouse gases which absorb these these 6% of the earth's radiation. And I hope you all remember the impact of greenhouse gases on the earth. So out of this 23%, 17% is been given out into the space and 6% is absorbed by the greenhouse gases. Now again, where are these greenhouse gases present? They are present into the atmosphere. तो ये 6% भी अभी एटमॉस्फेयर में गया. Now what happens? Let's see. 51% में से 23% का तो कैलकुलेशन हम लोगों ने देख लिया कि 23% has been radiated back by the earth into the atmosphere. Now how much is left? 28% is left still. 28% of the heat is still left जिसका हमें accounting पता नहीं है. Now let's see what happens. Out of this 28%, 9% is released into the atmosphere by convection. What do you mean by convection? When the surface of the earth gets heated up, now what happens is the heat rises up and up and up because the air which is there, the heat that is there which has been released by the earth's surface, it rises up, and this process of rising up of air is called as convection. So यहाँ से भी जो अर्थ ने हीट absorb की है उसमें से कितना 9% जो है वो एटमॉस्फेयर में जाता है because of convection. See, at the end of the day, everything is released back into the atmosphere. सब जाता है एटमॉस्फेयर में, but you need to understand कि कैसे कैसे जाता है. So some is been released into the space by scattering and all. कुछ greenhouse gases absorb करती है, तो कुछ that is 9% is been released into the atmosphere by convection, and the remaining 19% is anyways given out into the atmosphere. इस तरीके से if you see ये 17%, ये 6%, ये 9%, ये 19% सारे एटमॉस्फेयर में जाते हैं. So now we will let's see what happens. ये 14% जो यहाँ पे था ये एटमॉस्फेयर के पास है अभी. This 6% is also into the atmosphere. This 9% is also into the atmosphere. These 19% is also into the atmosphere, which makes a total of 48%, which is released by the atmosphere into the space. And that is how the entire solar insolation which reaches the earth वो बैलेंस आउट हो जाता है. इट अगेन गोज बैक इनटू द एटमॉस्फेयर एंड द हीट बजट ऑफ द अर्थ इज बीइंग मेंटेन्ड प्रॉपर्ली बाय द अर्थ थ्रू इट्स ओन नेचुरल processes. So I hope you all have understood what has been taught in today's video. If you have any doubt, please post your doubts into the comment section and reach out to me. I will surely solve your doubts. So see you soon in the next video. Thank you.